For generations, the story was simple. You sit in a classroom, open a history book, and you learn that Christopher Columbus discovered America in 1492. Now, to be accurate, no European actually discovered the continent. Millions of indigenous people had already lived across the Americas for tens of thousands of years. But when we look strictly at the history of European exploration, the textbook timeline is completely off. Modern archaeology has proven that Norse explorers beat Columbus to the punch by 5 whole centuries. Around the year 1000 AD, a Norse navigator named Leif Erikson heard rumors of land further west. He bought a ship, gathered a crew of about 35 men, and sailed directly into the unknown. What they found was remarkably fertile compared to the icy shores of Greenland they left behind. Wild grapes grew in such abundance that Erikson named this new territory Vinland, or Wineland. For a long time, historians dismissed this entire voyage as exaggerated folklore. The story was recorded only in the Icelandic sagas, leading academics to treat it as a myth. Up until the 1960s, the idea of a Viking America was treated as a ghost story. It needed physical evidence to be believed. That evidence finally surfaced when Norwegian explorer Helve Ingstad and archaeologist Anne Steen Ingstad launched an expedition to the northernmost tip of Newfoundland, Canada. At a site called Meadows, they noticed a series of overgrown mounds. When they excavated, the mounds revealed the distinct foundations of classic Norse longhouses. But the ultimate proof came from the dirt itself. They unearthed a collection of everyday items left behind by the inhabitants, including a stone lamp, a bronze fastening pin, and iron ship nails. At that time, indigenous peoples of the region did not smelt iron. Finding these iron and bronze artifacts on North American soil definitively proved Europeans had been there. Archaeologists doubt this site was a permanent city. Instead, it served as a winter base camp, a gateway to repair ships and launch further expeditions south into the Gulf of St. Lawrence. The soil of Newfoundland held the hard evidence. Half a millennium before Columbus set sail, Norse boots walked North America, turning a centuries-old fairy tale into historical fact. Which raises an obvious question. If the Vikings crossed the Atlantic and found a lush, resource-rich land centuries before anyone else in Europe, why didn't they stay? First, they met fierce resistance. The Icelandic sagas describe violent and bloody skirmishes between the Norse and the Native American populations. The Vikings had iron weapons, but they were heavily outnumbered and completely lacked the home field advantage. Then there was the logistics problem. To get supplies to Newfoundland, a ship had to survive the treacherous journey to Greenland, Iceland, and finally Norway. Maintaining a continuous supply chain across the massive Atlantic Ocean was virtually impossible. The final blow came from the environment itself. The initial Norse expansion happened during the medieval warm period, but shortly after they arrived in North America, global temperatures began to drop. As the climate cooled, sea ice expanded rapidly. This choked off their usual maritime routes, making an already dangerous Atlantic crossing nearly lethal. Defeated by overwhelming numbers, by impossible distances, and creeping ice, the Vikings made a practical choice. After roughly a decade or two, they packed up their ships and abandoned their greatest discovery. So if Leif Erikson achieved this maritime feat first, why does Christopher Columbus get all the historical credit? It comes down to impact. The Norse voyage was a historical dead end. They came, they saw, they fought, and they left. Any knowledge of Vinland was kept tightly isolated, locked away in Norse oral traditions. It had zero influence on the broader path of European history. Now look at this 15th century map, representing the Old World's perspective right before 1492. When Columbus set sail, Europe was primed to expand. His arrival triggered the Columbian Exchange, a massive, permanent collision between two previously unconnected hemispheres. That single collision violently rewired the globe. It mixed ecosystems, spread diseases, and permanently integrated trade and culture on a planetary scale. The Norse left a fleeting, secret footprint in the dirt. Columbus, by contrast, set off an unavoidable shockwave that the rest of the world is still riding today. History doesn't record who crosses the finish line first. It records who leaves a permanent mark, resigning Leif Erikson's staggering achievement to a magnificent, fading ghost story.